I'd like to welcome everyone to the Early Childhood Equity Grants special webinar. Today, we brought in the Early Learning Advisory Council and the Provider Supports Subcommittee for this special webinar. A few virtual meeting protocols. Make sure you mute yourself upon entry. If you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand or in the chat is typically the best way, and we will save most of our questions for the end to make sure that our presenters have a chance to get through. Anyone using a webcam or video option, of course, that will be displayed throughout the meeting. And with that, why don't we have everybody, if you have the opportunity to change your screen name to reflect whether you are an ELAC member, a regional advisor, or member of the public, or for those that are with DCYF, maybe you'd like to, if you haven't already, change your screen name to reflect that. That would be great. Welcome. Looks like we have a great turnout. And we will begin with introductions. So if each of you can, in chat, place your name, where you are located, and your role. And that will give us an opportunity to make sure that we account for everyone attending today. So we'll take a few minutes for all of you to type that in. Welcome, Lois. Welcome, Berta, and Aaron and Dee. Sandra, nice of you to join us. Rochelle, thanks for being here. Rebecca, nice to see you. Jen, welcome. Blanca, welcome. Katie, welcome. Carmen, of course. So nice to have you here. Hello, Heidi. Okay, well, while everyone else continues to let us know their names and where they're from. Hello, Talina, nice to see you. I would like to introduce Katie Simonowski, and she is with DCYF as the Child Care Grants Coordinator. And with that, Katie, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to turn on my screen sharing.
Perfect.
Good. Great. So we are here today to talk about the Early Childhood Equity Grant, the round one summary, and some next steps. So here's just a brief overview of what we're going to do today. We'll start with some reminders about the purpose of the Early Childhood Equity Grant, what the design process was like, and how grantees were chosen. And then I'll highlight some facts about grantees and what they said they would use the funds for. And then we'll talk some more in depth about how grantees were chosen, including some of our observations and highlighting where we're hoping that you all can give us feedback. Then we'll move into small group discussions where you all can make whatever suggestions you have or tell us what questions might still remain. So just to start, I wanted to review the purpose of the Early Childhood Equity Grant. Here on top, we have the purpose statement for round one. The Early Childhood Equity Grant is to direct funding to the early care and education community and parent support programs with a priority placed on BIPOC providers and providers serving BIPOC children to advance and inspire practices that promote inclusive and culturally responsive learning environments and enhanced language access. You can also see the purpose as stated in the Fair Start for Kids Act legislation to serve as a step toward expanding access to early learning statewide and transforming Washington's early learning system to make it more inclusive and equitable. So we're here to discuss in what ways we fulfilled these purposes with round one and how we might improve in future rounds. Okay, so this goes over a bit about the grant design process for anyone who might be new or who might have forgotten what happened in the spring. Notably, DCYF utilized liberatory design principles to co-design the grant with design team members. The design team consisted of providers who were eligible for the Early Childhood Equity Grant themselves, so they were helping to design a grant that they might later apply for. When we were deciding on ways to prioritize grant applications, the design team wanted to lead with racial equity. The prioritization process that they decided on used a bunch of different characteristics of the provider applying, the families they serve, and certain other things about the facilities. I'll go into specifics in a couple of slides, but first we're going to do an overview of the grant process. So here you can just see the steps that were involved. To start off with, we received 2,370 applications, which was obviously quite a few. We used the prioritization factors determined during the co-design process to take that initial group down to just 65 applications. We then worked with stakeholders to convene a community review panel. We relied on stakeholders to submit names for folks that they thought would be qualified to judge the early childhood equity grant proposals who had not themselves applied for a grant. The final panel consisted of several providers, employees of advocacy agencies, and a few DCYF staff from different program areas. The panel rated the 65 applications based on how much they thought the application deserved funding, from yes, this is something that DCYF should definitely fund, to no, this is something that DCYF definitely should not fund, or somewhere in between. So then we took those ratings and funded the 34 highest rated projects. Just to note, there wasn't anything particularly special about the number 34. That was just where we ran out of money for this round. So as I'm sure you all can do the math, 34 out of 2,370 applications means that DCYF was ultimately able to fund about 1.5% of the submitted applications. I want to flag here because it will be coming up as we talk about our results. The original prioritization criteria that were determined during the co-design process didn't take into account the size of the program or what they were going to do with the funding. We'll go over the specific prioritization factors in a few slides, like I already said, but they were focused more on the demographics of the provider, staff, and children in care, as well as certain features of the facility. So before we do that, here's just a look at who the awardees were. We funded facilities in 9 different counties and from all eligible provider types. So this side shows the counties that awardees were in. The top 2 were King and Yakima, which aligns with our language and demographic data. And then we had 7 others represented, as you can see on that map. This one that got a little bit cut off is Island County. Next, we're going to do a brief overview of what was actually funded. So what even were providers able to request funds for? Per the legislative requirements, the grant was open to requests in 4 categories: program design, program delivery, staff education and training, and program evaluation. Program design included things like purchasing curriculums and developing policies and procedures. So around 17% of the total amount awarded went to program design related requests. A common request in this category included curriculums. One specifically was the Creative Curriculum Bilingual Edition. And then a number of the policy and procedure requests were for things like convening a group of parents to review the facility's handbook. Program delivery included things like hiring specialized staff, purchasing classroom materials, and facilitating experiences for students and families. This was the largest category. As you can see, the majority of the funds, 56%, went to program delivery activities. So some specific examples of funded activities in this category included hiring a bilingual teacher. We had requests for Spanish speaking, Arabic speaking, providers who were able to use ASL, purchasing cultural accessories for dramatic play areas, purchasing pretend food from different cultures, requests for funding to bring in dancers from different cultures, funding to bring in food trucks representing different regional cuisines, just nice opportunities like that. We had a few comments from our review panel that some of these requests sometimes seem to be spending quite a lot of money on toys and materials. The review panel wondered if there was maybe a different area where the funding would do more good, but the current process makes that a hard thing for us to assess. The third spending category was staff education and training, which included things like conference registrations, training, college courses, education supports. About 22% of the funding went to requests here. So some sample requests included laptops and headphones to attend trainings, contracting with respecting ethnic and cultural heritage trainers, and purchasing language learning software. And then program evaluation, as y'all can see, was the smallest category, encompassing things like administering equity assessment tools or paying for consulting to complete evaluations. About 5% of the funds went to this category. A lot of the requests here weren't actually related to program evaluation, but rather evaluation of children, things like hiring a consultant to help complete the CDC milestones, which wasn't really what we intended. But we did also get some requests for things like hiring a program evaluator to interview staff and parents and prepare a recommendation report for leadership, which would be within the intent. So with that context on what the funds were for and where the money went, next I'm going to talk through the prioritization factors. So you can see the priority factors that were developed during the initial design session. To flag it, this is an area where we're looking for feedback to help increase access and resources for children. So we're open to changing these factors, the idea of prioritization, where in the selection process they factor in, we can leave things as is, so on, but we're really open to feedback here, and we're going to be looking at the feedback that we get. So these are the priority factors that were considered in the round 1 awards. I'm sure most of you can read these, but I'm going to read them out loud in case that's easier, or if there's anyone who isn't able to view the presentation and is just listening. So the first priority score factor was we decided to prioritize facilities serving a large percentage of BIPOC children, then facilities serving a large percentage of children receiving state subsidies, facilities serving children experiencing houselessness or homelessness, facilities serving children in out-of-home care due to child welfare involvement, facilities serving children who speak languages other than English at home, facilities with a BIPOC licensee or license exempt program owner, facilities with BIPOC staff, facilities that use a language other than English in the care environment, and facilities that provide care during non-standard hours or 24-hour care. Providers were prioritized according to these factors, which were developed in partnership with providers on our design teams. There were 57 providers that got the highest possible priority score, which means that they had every possible factor, though many of their applications were disqualified for other reasons, like asking for funding for unallowable expenses. All licensed providers that were included as finalists scored very highly, which meant that in general, they were BIPOC providers serving majority BIPOC children receiving state subsidy who speak English or who spoke languages other than English, both at home and in the care environment, and so on. So just to flag something that we will talk about, we believe that these priority factors were mathematically biased towards smaller facilities, even though that wasn't the intent of the design team members. So we are going to take a close look at why we believe that and why it might have happened next. But I also wanted to pause to see if anyone had any questions about anything we went over so far. I don't know, anyone? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to continue, but if Kelsey can jump in and let me know if anyone said anything in the chat that I'm missing or anything like that, that'd be great. Okay. So, right, we just went over the priority factors. When we take those priority factors and we look at who actually applied, this is how it shows up. So you can see that a lot of the demographics are similar, except that on the right-hand side, licensed family homes and smaller centers, you have a lot more of those smaller facilities serving non-standard or 24-hour care. You can also see that the number of children served in facilities that are licensed for over 50 children are more than all other facilities combined. So We can see in other categories, the numbers aren't that different, no matter the program size. For example, children who speak languages other than English at home is pretty high across the board. They're included in facilities at almost every size. Looking back on our meetings with the design team members, there was a pretty clear consensus that BIPOC children should be prioritized when awarding grant funds. We met with a couple of different groups, and all of them agreed that BIPOC kids should get priority. The groups were also in consensus that low-income families should be prioritized. The other priority factors were also suggested by or favored by some design team members, but others were more neutral. Maybe no one objected to them. And someone was very enthusiastic about it. But I'm pretty sure when I went back over my notes that design team members wouldn't go to the mat, so to speak, for any of the factors if that factor was getting in the way of supporting BIPOC kids. Right. So the concern here is that the effect of prioritizing like this, using the priority score factors that we did, is out of step with our purpose statement for round one, which included placing a priority on, quote, BIPOC providers and providers serving BIPOC children. So as we can see from the numbers here, the vast majority of BIPOC children included in the early childhood equity grant applications, over 18,000, are served in facilities with capacities greater than 26. Using a formula that deprioritizes these facilities, even inadvertently, affects these children. So now that you have this context, the next few slides will focus on some broad observations, and then we'll talk about what we're hoping to get from you all, mostly suggestions for how to solicit more equity-focused, high-quality, and specific proposals, and how to ensure the best use of funds. Okay, so as we share everything that we just went over, we know that you haven't had the time to look at it the same way that we have. So we wanted to share our observations. So here are a few highlights that we want to call out for you. You'll also have time to share your observations when we do our Jamboard activity a little bit later. So we received a large number of applications for costs that weren't allowable or were for things that were just not related to equity. So that included things like requests for medical or hygiene procedures, international trips, regular business operating costs like rent or paying for staff that you already have, things like vehicles, purchasing vehicles. So we didn't allow these ineligible applications to proceed to the finalist round. Ineligible applications were removed from consideration. Still, our community review panelists who rated the finalists expressed some negative feelings about some of the projects they were presented with. So we were hoping going into this that providers would submit applications reflecting their ideas for projects, by which we mean a coordinated set of activities for these projects to improve their provision of culturally and linguistically specific or supportive early learning. Instead, we received a lot of applications that had very similar requests that used similar or the same wording to justify the requests. Now, obviously, some of these were from, facilities that were maybe related in like centers that are part of a chain, which obviously might make sense. But this also happened with facilities that were totally unrelated and were from different geographic areas. So we believe that some providers worked together on their applications, and we've also heard that some providers used unqualified grant writers who gave multiple providers the same language for requests. So since the purpose of the grant is, like I just read, to support inclusive and culturally and linguistically specific learning, it would seem sort of contra to the purpose of the grant for providers to ask for these more generic funds. It seems to me at least to be more in line with the purpose of the grant for providers to ask for funding for their specific needs, as opposed to funding for a generic idea that could apply to multiple providers. So nothing about the grant process as it stands currently discourages providers from submitting these copy and pasted applications. Quite a few had high enough priority scores to make it into the finalist pool. Once their reviewers expressed that they didn't want to rate these applications as highly, but there were enough duplicate applications included in the pool that many were still funded, even if they received slightly lower ratings. A third thing to note is that While we didn't specifically prioritize applications with an IDA license capacity, and our design team members didn't intend for that outcome when they were generating the priority factors, our priority funding formula does seem mathematically biased to favor smaller facilities. This was, again, not an intention of the design group that came up with the formula. And then finally, we had several reviewers raise concerns that providers wanted to spend, in some cases, tens of thousands of dollars on things like toys and dramatic play materials. So what we heard is that the priority criteria we used, which were based on demographics and communities served, did not always align with projects that reviewers felt were most likely to impact the care that children receive. And so I see a question from Lois. I don't have the racial breakdown of the grant review team handy. Kelsey, do you want to speak to how the grant review team was recruited since you were there for that part?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually just typing to Lois in the chat, but you beat me to it. Here, I'll turn my camera on. So we did use our ally organizations who helped us really from the beginning in the laboratory design process to kind of host design teams and work together to collaborate with providers on this grant process. We came back to them to help solicit names of individuals who could serve on a community review panel. And so people were nominated from Voices of Tomorrow, from Child Care Aware of Washington, from the Imagine Institute. I'm probably missing some. I think we worked with One America also. And we did ensure that the community review panel involved a diverse racial and geographic background. I think I hit your points there.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey. So I was just then going to read a few quotes that members of the review panel made about different projects. So one commented about one project: the majority of asking funding is to purchase classroom materials for children based on the list in the application. I didn't find how these materials are selected for equity curriculum. Another one: cost estimate is weak and vague. Another: insufficient data to justify expense. Not really demonstrating use of funds for inclusive, cultural, or linguistic purposes. Looks like much of the materials are just general supplies for childcare, not culturally or linguistically focused. So those were just a few comments that some of our reviewers made on the proposals that they were rating, which again were the 65 finalists that we had. So even though we tried to encourage programs to reflect on their offerings and abilities to serve a more inclusive environment, we noticed that there were a few that really stood out in their ability to describe how they would use the Early Childhood Equity Grant to improve their facility or to meet an unmet need of a child or children who are in their care. So these are just a few example requests that I was really fond of. So the first was from a Play and Learn group. I'm just going to read you the request. We will hire developmental therapists, audiologists, and speech therapists from within our community who speak the languages of the caregivers of children in our program to carry out quarterly developmental, hearing, and speech screenings of preschoolers in our Play and Learn program and begin early intervention for any identified issues. Some families attending our program are unfamiliar with the U.S. medical system, uncomfortable speaking to doctors and therapists in English, do not have their own transportation or financial means to pay for private screenings and therapy. So often developmental issues aren't identified until their children start elementary school. This missed opportunity for intervention can have long-lasting consequences. So I thought that this was an ask that was highly specific to this particular program and to the particular families that they serve. They did a really good job identifying an unmet need in their community that they could solve if given funding. And it's clear from their explanation why their facility in particular was well positioned to meet this need. The second is from a family friend and neighbor caregiver. As a care provider to a young Alaska Native boy, I'm requesting funds to attend Tlingit and Haida, sorry for mispronouncing that probably, Washington chapter annual picnics and various powwows, potlucks, and celebrations in King County for 2022 to 2023. These events offer music and Indigenous dance, arts and speakers, I would also request funds for educational materials for learning the geography, ecosystems, and wildlife, and promoting learning policies related to his Indigenous culture. So again, this is a request that's designed to meet an unmet need for the child in her care. She wants to use the funds to travel with him to specific festivals and events that are related to his culture, and to purchase materials that help share with him other aspects of his native background. The third request that we pulled out was from a licensed family home in Yakima County. We will use the money to purchase the CULTS pre-K dual language curriculum. CULTS stands for Cultivating Oral Language and Literacy Talents in Students. Additionally, we would purchase the necessary book bundles that go along with the lessons in both English and Spanish. Most of the Valley, where the children under my care live, are bilingual, and the majority of my enrolled children have only Spanish-speaking parents. Currently, my employee and myself try to engage with the children to teach them letters and sounds in English and Spanish, but we'd like to be able to provide a more targeted curriculum to help develop the essential pre-K foundation these children need. We like that there are take-home handouts in Spanish to enable parents to fully engage with their children and to see their progression. So, this is pretty simple, but again, you can see the provider identifying a need, in this case, wanting to be able to take a more formal approach to teaching their bilingual pre-K kids in both English and Spanish, to make sure they don't have any gaps in learning as they enter kindergarten. And then it's easy to understand from the request why this purchase will help support the specific kids in this facility. And then just a fourth request that we were going to highlight was from a childcare center in Clark County. We will work with DEI training, assessment, and coaching consultants, and then they gave the specific consultant name, which I'm redacting, in order to build comprehensive learning supports for staff regarding DEI curriculum, DEI professional development training, and coach advisement thinking sessions, including an initial assessment with overall agency report for each site, along with follow-up comparison assessment to monitor growth. This consultancy will assist our center with making evidence-based decisions rooted in an equity lens with the anticipated outcomes of improving experiences and service delivery to our children and families. So it's a little more difficult to describe the need to fund a program evaluation, since the point is kind of that you don't know what you don't know. But I liked this one because they describe specific deliverables, the overall agency report, the follow-up assessments to monitor improvement, and the outcome that they're looking to achieve, which is improving experiences and service delivery. So next, we're going to transition into sort of where we want help from you all preparing for round 2. But before we move on, does anyone have any questions about round 1? I see D in the comments. Is the award amount the same for home-based care as for centers? Did this relate to the number of children? No. So the award amount here was based on the program request. So basically, we had facilities submit requests for specific items, services, materials they wanted to purchase, et cetera. They were allowed to submit requests from between the minimum award amount and the maximum award amount, which were the same for both home-based care and centers. So I believe they were $15,000 as the floor and $100,000 as the ceiling. And then we had different minimums and maximums for the other types of facilities that were eligible. So in addition to licensed family homes and centers, play and learn groups, family, friend, and neighbor caregivers, and ECAP contractors were also eligible to apply. So they had different floors and ceilings, but the floor and ceiling were the same for centers and home care. And again, what the particular award was varied depending on what the provider requested. Anyone else have any questions? Yeah, Carmen?
Yes, some of the providers at home providers have the ECAP program. When you mention ECAP program, it's exclusively the ECAP program in the school district, or can be included the ECAP program in at-home daycares?
So we had some late breaking changes to ECAP eligibility. I believe the way that they shook out, and Kelsey should correct me if I'm wrong, are that any site that was both licensed and ECAP applied through the license, and then sites that were only ECAP sites applied through the ECAP contractor. Does that sound right, Kelsey?
Yeah,
because
I can.
recently the home providers was included in the ECAP program, like a pilot program, right? But I'm not sure if we qualify when we submit the application. In some part, they ask you if you ECAP in the ECAP program. Can we select it, this part too? We have to select in the application ECAP program or not?
I'm
Or
gonna
home daycare?
Sorry, Carmen, I'm processing what your question is. Are you asking if you needed to use a different application as a licensed family home than you would if you were ECAP only?
The thing is, when we are going to fill the application, in the application ask you if you are ECAP program, and then ask you if you home provider or center or another kind of for early start or some else. But my question specifically, we are going to set, because I have home daycare, but I have ECAP too in my home daycare. So when I when I fill the application, need to select both or just home daycare?
Okay, thank you for saying that again. I appreciate it. If you are a licensed program, and it sounds like, yes, you are a licensed family home, you would be applying through the WA Compass provider portal. And the application in that system, the WA Compass provider portal application, it should not ask you which type you are. You shouldn't have to answer that question.
No?
So it's possible that you might have gone to the application that's not in WA Compass that was focused on ECAP only sites that do not have a license, and on play and learn programs, they had an application outside of WA Compass. But if you're licensed, you can access the application inside of WA Compass.
Oh, okay. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your patience as I tried to answer that.
Any other questions? Okay, y'all are quiet today. Sorry, I'm just dragging my windows back over. So these are the questions that you should have received on the agenda and that you'll be talking about when we go into break rooms. So right now we are preparing to go out into those breakout rooms. You'll be going into a room of about 5 randomly selected people to explore these questions on the Jamboard. The Jamboard link should be in the chat. Yeah, Kelsey just put it there. Thank you. One person can take notes, or you can all put your own notes in. I think you're all pretty proficient with Jamboard at this point, but definitely let us know if you need any help and one of us can pop in. So you'll have about 40 minutes to talk through all of these. So look at the questions here, and then you'll want to spend about 10 minutes per question as a general guideline. If you have a question and you want a DCYF person to pop in to try to answer it, feel free to put a sticky note on the Jamboard or come back into the main room, send the host a question, just reach out whatever way you can, and someone will come in to help get you that information that you're looking for. And so then I'm just going to read the things that we want you to discuss, again, in case anyone can't see the screen. So the first was, what questions should DCYF be asking ourselves and providers related to the Early Childhood Equity Grant? 2, how do we increase the number of strong applications? Remember that 50% of grant applicants applied for funding for costs that were not allowable. 3, would you do anything to improve the scoring and priority criteria? And then 4, a subtitle to the grant could be added to better signal to providers what funds are for and what proposals should include. do you have any proposed subtitles? And then we have 2 examples: Early Childhood Equity Grant to fund new ideas for cultural and linguistic supports to children, or Early Childhood Equity Grant for projects that expand access to inclusive and culturally responsive learning. So if you have any thoughts on those, the idea of a subtitle in general, or any ideas for subtitles, we would love to hear about them. And now I think Jessica will be sending you all into breakout rooms. So if you want to open up that Jamboard link so you have it, and then we can get going. Hey, Sandra, you have a hand up?
I do, thank you. Besides the fact that Jamboard doesn't like me, we weren't able to post anything on it.
It said we had to be signed into our Google account in order to be able to request edits.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Have you tried, just offhand, can you try refreshing the page and see if that helps at all?
oh, okay.
Heidi, was that a thumbs up? It did help, or was okay. Well, we were actually just talking before you all came back into this room about giving some extended time because we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and we were seeing some good feedback coming in, and would love to be able to extend the session so that you can continue to, or begin, in your case, begin to post some sticky notes on the Jamboard. How does that sound?
That sounds okay with me. What do you think, Heidi? Okay.
Yeah, I really apologize that you were unable to add the sticky notes. I'm so sorry about that. But I'm glad that refreshing the page fixed it. What are we thinking of for a little bit of extra time here? Do we want to do like an additional 15 to 20 minutes?
Well, in our group, Kelsey, 2 members had to drop off for other meetings, so it was Rebecca and I. I don't know if we need more time. We can, maybe Rebecca, you can always weigh in too. We could always look at joining other groups if that's what you choose to do, if you want us to go back in. Because
yeah, so thank you for sharing that. It's good to know that a couple people had to drop out. I think we're going to do 15 minutes to go back in, and I'd like to pose another question. You'll see on the first slide when it talks about what questions should DCYF be asking ourselves and providers related to the Early Childhood Equity Grant. One of the next steps, so this meeting with ELAC and provider supports is like our first stop to starting and kicking off this refinement process. And one of the things we'd like to do as a next step is to engage a wider provider population, possibly by sending out a survey to start with. And I'd love the feedback of members of this group to add any questions that they think we should be asking providers in that survey. That would be really helpful to us as we work on, what do we want to hear from providers? How, what kind of feedback do we want to gather from them? So that would be super helpful too in these next 15 minutes. And I'm totally fine with having the breakout sessions be joined by other people. And by that, I mean Lois and whoever you were with that is still here.
Kelsey, a quick question. How much was the total amount of the grants?
Yeah, we had, for this first round, we had 1.7 million.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, with that, can we go back into breakout rooms for 15 minutes, Jessica? or Eric, whoever's managing that part?
Yes, they're open now.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm talking and muted. That's great. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for taking that extra time to add a few more stickies there and for coming back to join us. We really appreciate the feedback and are really looking forward to, kind of implementing and gathering feedback and implementing refinements for this second round. Katie, do you still have a couple more slides to go back into here?
1 second. I think just 1 or 2 more. So like we just went over, these were the breakout room questions. Then we had a few next steps. So you can see here, this is our first kind of stop on the feedback tour. We'll also be meeting with ally organizations and government to government to get their feedback as well. And then, like Kelsey said, when you guys came back from the first breakout, we are planning to send a survey to providers to gather more input on what revisions should be implemented for round 2. And then we are planning to share what we learned and what refinements will be implemented for round 2. We haven't decided exactly how that sharing will happen yet. It kind of depends on the feedback, what specific feedback we get before deciding how this further communication will happen. And then I believe we are done.
Thank you so much, everyone. And just so you know, while we might not know exactly what that last step on our slide about next steps looks like, what we are committed to looping back around with you through our regular feedback loop, and we're committed to following up with you on how we use your feedback and on what we learn from providers. So thank you so much. We really appreciate your time today, and this is good work. So thank you.
I have a really quick question, Kelsey. Is this Jamboard going to be open for a little while for people to continue to put sticky notes up on? I'm feeling like the amount of information you can actually put on a sticky note doesn't really reflect the conversation that we've been able to have around these things. And so it seems very oversimplified, where there's going to need to be more explanation. I'm wondering if you look at these and you have more questions, how are you going to be able to reach out for more understanding around what we're talking about here?
Totally. We can absolutely have the what am I saying? The link, the Jamboard page open. Probably we can leave it up till like tomorrow afternoon if that would be helpful. So feel free to add to it as you will. And if we do have, if there's something that you feel like needs a little more follow up, feel free to flag it and put that in there, and we'll know to reach out.
Thank you.
To help. Lois, you have your hand up?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to share, looking at the turnout today, I know this is supposed to be a meeting for ELAC members and provider support, but you can see from the turnout, this in no way represents either one of those groups. So I'm thinking it would be good for you to speak with the, Eric is there, speak with the EC team about coming to an ELAC and provider supports meeting to actually ask these questions, because, having 4 or 5 people does not represent either one of those groups.
Thank you so much for that feedback, Lois. And I believe Erin will follow up with you on scheduling.
We'll take care of that. Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you, Katie. And Kelsey, does anyone have any other questions for Kate or Kelsey?
I don't have any other questions, but I do, well, maybe it is a question. I noticed that the second part of your feedback loop, the first part is you're going to be going to like partners and getting some feedback. So I'm part of like the CCA of WA team. Is that one of the partners you're going to be getting feedback from, and how is that going to happen? And then my second part of that question is, when you're sending provider surveys to get more information about refining that, is that just going to be providers, or is that also going to go out to like ELEC members and partners to give a little bit more specific feedback?
Those are great questions. And as we shared, this is the very first step in this refinement process. And so we're still kind of working out some of the specifics there. I do believe that Child Care Aware of Washington is one of our ally organizations. And so when we meet with them, I believe that Child Care Aware of Washington will be involved. In terms of a survey, I think as we develop the survey, we'll take a look at who the audience needs to be. I think that the intent of the survey specifically is to gather feedback directly from providers, but I know that many ELAC members are also providers, and I don't believe they would be excluded from this.
I guess my question more is, like, I feel like we have more information than the typical provider regarding the process that was gone through to choose the ultimate recipients of this grant. And so without that information, I'm wondering how much feedback providers are actually going to be able to give, not knowing that process. Is there going to be something in between time to inform them of that, kind of like we did today?
I think that is something that we'll have to, as we work on putting together what our next steps are and what they look like, we'll take that into consideration. So thank you for that feedback.
Okay, wonderful. Well, with that, before you all go, we would love to hear what you thought of today's presentation. So if you would please take a moment and share your thoughts in the Menti link I just placed in chat. And as you do that, I'd like to remind everyone, for those that are still here, that our next ELAC meeting is scheduled for February 7th. And our next provider supports meeting is scheduled for February 8th. So we are about 1 month away from both of those dates. And as I look, thank you everyone that's still here for providing some general feedback on today's presentation. With that, we will bid you all farewell, give you back 12 minutes of your day. And we'd like to thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.